the moderator of this session to come and join us on stage. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. It's very nice to see that so many have remained for this very last session we're having within our very too dense 1 day and a half conference. It's a bit weird to be on stage and not really to see faces, but I've seen that for the Q&A we have light on, so then we'll be able to further share and further see who's there and who wants to exchange on practices. So our session, this session, is going to be as much interactive as possible, meaning we'll try and save some space at the end of this session for Q&A, so please keep in mind your questions. It means we'll finish also a bit later than planned originally. We'll finish the session at 1:15 so that we have time for this Q&A. And talking about the topic we're going to cover now, I really like the last question, the question we had just before the break, because that's exactly what we're going to talk about right now. So we've covered many topics in these last 2 days about just transition. We've talked about jobs and skills, we talked about urban planning, we talked a lot about democracy, participation, including everybody. But even before going, I would say, to the involvement of all citizens and stakeholders in the process of designing cities, we are going to look into the approaches that cities have initiated to ensure that everybody's on board, everybody can benefit from what has been designed. So how do we ensure that everybody can benefit from climate adaptation solutions, from sustainable energy, sustainable mobility, sustainable housing? How do we identify the needs? And how do we ensure that what we offer as solutions are actually reflecting the needs? This, I think this is also kind of a nice closing loop to the very first session we had yesterday morning, and especially Yvonne Pereira's presentation, where she mentioned a lot of these topics, but also the fact that everybody, the different aspects that we'll come back to in a minute, the fact that everybody should be on board. I think, we have a lot of first reflection to share about this. I'm saying first reflections because, as opposed to Eddie's session before, our work is just kicking off right now. So we're happy to be presenting with you what we are going to do in the next couple of months. And our first insights, our first reflection, our first analysis, and mostly the questions we really want to dig into. And that means we're also very happy to get your contributions, either right now during the session and the Q&A, or later during the lunch, or later via any other means. And we don't need to travel, obviously, to talk. We have now become experts in Zooms. So all this is really the chance also to bring in your city experiences so that we know more of what's happening in the EU in this regard. So before entering, going into anything more concrete from our side, from what we prepared, we also wanted to start with a Slido from your side, so you already know how it works. You scan the QR code, or you enter the hashtag. And we have a very first question, which is a bit more difficult than the previous ones, which is totally open. It's an open-ended question, where we want you to share with us if you feel that there is a concern at city level to ensure that everybody can benefit from green transition. Obviously, you can answer yes or no, maybe, I'm not sure. But if you can just be a bit more emotional about it, say, yeah, that would be great, yeah, but actually we don't have the time or energy, or we haven't thought about it, or just share in a few words the situation that you have. And the idea being really that here we're going to look, as for the rest of the conference, on the link in between the just and green transition. We want to see, okay, NA, I suppose that means no. We really want to see what the link is in between green and social policies. And in that aspect, it's really about getting citizens, residents of cities on board. Obviously, it has some linkages with the jobs and skills, with the business development, with the trainings, but here it's really if you develop a specific policy with regard to improving infrastructure with nature-based solutions, for example, can everybody access it? If you have a local policy to promote sustainable energy consumption or sustainable mobility, can everybody benefit? So now we see the first answers. Oh yeah, it's going to be a bit difficult, but okay, not really, no, not enough, not really. There was something below that is not, there is no coherent strategy. Oh, someone is super positive. We have a segregated city and it will be a challenge to keep everyone on board. And we'll see also that we have, well, the examples we have, as we've discussed also during these last 2 days, it's a lot about specific projects for specific areas, including specific target groups. It lacks a strategy. I missed it. So now we have lots of answers which I cannot follow, sorry. At Amsterdam, during the present negotiation, this is a priority after the election. Does everybody has to benefit, or some have to lose a bit? We talked about also the sacrifices we have to make. The Green Vision Amsterdam is inclusive and distributed, and we'll see some examples from cities of how it's actually implemented. Yeah, I think it would be great if we could find a way to extract these answers. We'll check with the UI colleagues, and maybe we can even share that via social media at some point. I'll be curious to go into more details on all these answers. I was not expecting so many answers, so it's great. But I hope you do have the time to go through them, and you have still a couple of seconds on your screens to go through the answers, I think, for you to have a look at it. So there is a varied landscape, and I really like that there is not much of an awareness of the necessary links and no strategy, and that's something that so far we've identified is key. Well, spoiler alert, we have identified that there is a lot about social policies, green policies, but it seems, or is that the question we have for now, to which extent are the two interconnected in European cities? Okay, thank you very much for this one. Very interesting. Once again, I wasn't expecting so much success. So the next two questions are a lot more focused. Just need to answer, to select the answer that you like. The first question is related to the accessibility and affordability to benefiting from green transition. What are, according to you, the biggest barriers? So for cities, as a municipality, what is the most difficult for you to implement a policy or strategy to ensure that nobody would be left behind? So is it because there is no vision or leadership, or you don't have data, you're not aware, you don't have enough knowledge of the issues at stake? There is no sufficient or not adequate financial framework. There is a lack of policy in this regard. There are no available funds to implement such policies, and all the national and European framework is inadequate as well. Curiously, it seems to be a more difficult question. Only, oh no, now 27 people have answered. Okay, so now we have a call for elected representatives, I suppose, to have a strong vision and leadership in this regard. And it seems from the answers we've received, it's designing adequate policies would be useful. We've seen in previous comments also finding the links. The financial framework, data, funds to a lesser extent, and wider framework also to a lesser extent. But yeah, for sure, vision and policy. And the last question we have for you is, according to you, for some groups of people, I'm remaining wide and broad on purpose at this moment, but how do you want to ensure that everybody accesses what is offered in terms of green transition? How come some people do not access these services and technologies? So is it because they do not have the funds, they do not have the money because it's too expensive? Is it because they do not know this exists? Or is it because they don't have the capacity or the skills to actually benefit from them? Is it because they don't have the time? It takes a lot of time to change habits as well, and the offer is not adequate to their needs. So it seems at the moment it's a lot about targeted, better targeting what is on offer, what is on the shelf. So many people, well, according to you, many people are just unaware of what there is, and maybe what there is not adequate so much to how they could use it, and yeah, quite important are the others as well. So I thank you very much for this. I think now it's given you already an idea of the topics that we want to cover today and in the next couple of months. And I'm going to introduce to you the work that we have started to do. We have already done, well, in technical terms, we have finished our inception phase for this work. So we have already scanned through some literature, talked to a few representatives from the European Commission, from European organizations, to actually understand what is at stake and what we should look into for the future, or for the future of our work. And I just want to explain to you what we're going to focus on and some initial reflections we have had. So the main question we're going to address is really the ways cities are acting to address accessibility and affordability of green transitions to all. The first point about affordability. So we have observed that not everybody can pay for the services. Some are too expensive, but there is also, we've discussed also yesterday the issue of the redistributive effects or non-redistributive effects, and the fact that some people are more affected than others by some measures which are in place. In concrete terms, in terms of affordability, we talked a lot yesterday about cooling, or there was someone who mentioned the increasing issue that we're going to have with increased heat waves about cooling, the need for cooling. And if you already have issues paying your energy bill, it might be even more difficult to pay for cooling systems. In terms of accessibility, this relates also to the answer that you gave. It seems that some people do not have access to certain type of services and technologies. Infrastructure, for example, is just non-existent, but it can also be about a lack of just knowledge that exists or of skills. In terms of vulnerable groups, so we are going to focus onto the aspect of ensuring that everybody can benefit from the green transition. And by ensuring that everybody can benefit, we want to specifically look at projects which have been designated or designed for specific groups. We're going to look into the 5 criteria which can define vulnerability. So first of all, it can be groups which are vulnerable because they are discriminated. We're going to talk about gender in this session, but it could be about age. We've talked also, actually yesterday we were having discussions about elderly versus children, but age can be a factor as well. Geography, so in some neighborhoods there's no infrastructure, or there can be no public sustainable or public transport, for example. It can be about vulnerability because there is a lack of institution relevant to address the needs of all groups, and that would be a vulnerability on the grounds of governance. It can be a vulnerability on the grounds of the socio-economic status because of the lack of resources, of adequate earnings. And last but not least, it's also the exposure to shocks and risks. So we do know that also some groups are more affected than others in being afflicted, for example, by floodings or by natural disasters in general. So this is the framework within which we're going to work on. And as Eddie mentioned, this whole work is based on the 86 UIA-funded projects. We have scanned through all of them to identify the most relevant ones for our work. You will see in a minute, I will present to you the ones we have selected. You might feel that it's a bit repetitive, but on the other hand, it shows the complexity and the richness of the UIA project. So you will hear again about some projects we mentioned this morning, but yesterday as well. and you will actually realize that they don't only focus on what you've heard of before, but on many different aspects. So the first scanning and mapping of this UI project has identified initiatives in these 4 areas which are presented here. So we've identified projects which try to ensure that everybody can benefit from climate adaptation solution, from sustainable energy, sustainable housing, and sustainable mobility. For your information, that's what we're going to focus on in our work, so in the upcoming month. So what barriers do cities face in ensuring that everybody can benefit from the green transition? What are the key lessons, and how can we replicate and upscale what's been learned, what's been gone through by our cities? Just for your information, we're finishing the inception phase. We're working on detailed analysis and right now case studies, and we should finish second half of this year the whole project, and you'll be more than welcome to follow up on what's happening there. Just briefly showing you the cases we have identified for our work. You might recognize yourselves, you might have other cities in mind, so please let us know as well. So we, in terms of climate adaptation cities, you know already some of them, but 3 in particular are focusing on creating cool islands in specific neighborhoods and or accessible to specific target groups to all. So Puig is focusing on the planting trees for all citizens. GBG is to see from Barcelona. Some of you have heard about it yesterday. I'm sorry, I'm going to be a bit, I think, simplistic, but it's pretty similar to what we heard about Oasis and the idea of creating cool islands available to the whole neighborhood. Kartuja Kanat, we visited it yesterday with these nature-based solutions as well. And Resilio, we heard about it this morning, and what's particularly interesting in our study is that the routes are not accessible to the citizens, but they do affect positively in terms of water retainment, the people, the residents of the housing and of the social housing and of the neighborhood. In terms of sustainable energy, we have a strong focus on energy consumption and energy poverty. You'll hear more from APU in a minute. So I'm not saying more about this one. We have Zagreb, which is actually a Eurocities city partner, and where students are trained to carry out audits in people who have difficulties paying their bills. We heard about Villa de Cans, Villa Watt, earlier on today, and we've chosen it especially for its engagement via learning communities and the ways everybody can benefit from the whole system we mentioned before in terms of the currency retrofitting and the governance model. In terms of sustainable housing, we'll look at 3 different ways of envisaging sustainability accessible to all. Yes, we've selected it because it looks at the issue more of urban density and urban sprawl being fought by renovating vacant spaces for creating affordable housing. Icarus, we'll hear from it and from its innovative revolving fund in renovation in a minute, and super circular estate focus on the circular use of material for building social housing. And last but not least, we have cities focusing on sustainable mobility, SASMOB and InnoWare focusing on more data analysis and making a best use of public transport, Commute, which is looking at the multimodality of transport, and UMEO, who's adopted a gender perspective on transport and public transport, and you'll hear more from Annika on that in a minute. Just very briefly, some very first insights we have started to extract from the first analysis, and it will also ring a bell towards what we've discussed before. So as you see, we have lots of various situations, different target groups. We work on different topics. We are going to look into different solutions, it's well, interconnection of issues is key. We've talked about integration already many times these days, but here it's especially quite obvious when you talk, for example, about the available housing, available, affordable, and sustainable housing, depending on the transport that you have, and or housing and energy performance of buildings. The interconnection is not always obvious. It can be in theoretical terms, but not necessarily at the policy level. That's what we're going to look into, and indeed with the need for further integration. We have identified that with a variety of situations we have, the place-based approach is key. Having, we heard that as well, one-fits-all solution doesn't work. And adequate urban planning, together with the involvement of all stakeholders, is quite important, or has been in these cases. We have seen also different situations between rural and urban areas. And the last point about smarter cities is also a point that was raised early on. On the one hand, digitalization of services can improve the sustainability of the city. On the other, it can prevent some people, some groups to access these services. So we're going to look into further details on that as well. We have lots of questions in the air about strategies and policies, how to make the link in between them, about the ways cities have assessed the needs for specific services and or products, but how they have done that, the engagement of target groups in the co-creation of adequate solutions. We've had discussions about the links with in terms of multi-level governance, but also the skills needed internally within the administration to ensure that all these aspects are taken into consideration. So, without further ado, I would like to invite our three panelists to come, three first panelists to come on stage. We have three cities who are going to present, yes, you can, who are going to present what's happening in their cities in more details in this regard. So we have Derkin de Bats from the city of Ghent presenting the Icarus project, Fernando Gonzalez from the EPU project in Getafe presenting, the EPU project, sorry, and Annika Dylan from the city of Umeo presenting the gender approach to public transport. As we discussed before, you can come here to present, you can sit, it's up to you. Feel free to already note down the questions you will have for the panelists. We will not launch the Q&A straight after the presentations because we'll have a few panel discussion, but you have time for asking for more questions. So, Jacqueline, the floor or the stand is yours.
For the introduction. Okay. So, my name is Dirkie de Baats. I work for the housing department of the city of Ghent. It's important to know that Ghent is the third largest city in Belgium with approximately 260,000 inhabitants. And in Ghent, as in many other places, there's a lack of affordable housing. The private rental market is very narrow and the social housing waiting lists are very, very long. But at the same time, there's a high percentage of home ownerships in Belgium, which means that a lot of people go at great lengths to buy a house, often a small old workman house, but then don't have the means to renovate it. So we estimate that there are 10,000 people in Ghent in that kind of situation, and we call them captive owners because they own a house, but then they're kind of stuck in a poor living condition without the financial means to renovate. And selling the house is not an option because the alternatives on the rental market or the social housing are very limited. Okay. So now I get to our project, which is Icarus, and our project is trying to find a solution to find that problem of those captive owners stuck in their poor living conditions. So the goal is to make the houses safer, more qualitative, and more energy efficient. So at the same time, it's also a project that tries to fight energy poverty, especially now with the rising prices. And we do this renovation by the use of a recurring fund. So we provide a starting capital of 30,000 euros per house, With this fund, the house is renovated, but the starting capital only has to be paid back upon change of ownership of the house. So when it's sold, when the owner deceases, so which means that the inhabitants can benefit from their renovated house their entire lifetime if they want to. And once this financial contribution is repaid to the fund, it can be used for another housing renovation, which is why we call it a recurring fund. So this fund means that the public finance is not only used once for one specific person, but that it can be used over and over again to renovate a lot of houses. Of course, it's important to find the right target group, which might seem easy, but it's a target group that's not very reachable. So we also have like a set of guidelines which make everything more difficult, of course. But it's important that the house that we try to renovate is, before the renovation, of course, not meeting the minimal standards of the Flemish Housing Code, which ensures like basic living quality and safety in houses. But that it could be renovated with 30,000 euros because it's important to like be able to really give a qualitative house afterwards. The candidates need to have a limited current disposable income. They can only own one property because otherwise it's possible to sell one and renovate it with those incomes. And they need to have a fire insurance. And of course, there's also a specific attention for other vulnerabilities than financial ones. For example, there's a specific target group for the elderly or for people with physical disabilities. Once the participants are selected, the guidance can start, and this is, besides the innovative financial instrument, a really important part of the project. There's social counselors that take care of the active search for the captive owners, but also help people to collect all the necessary documents for the registration process. And they also help through the practical side of the renovation, which can mean also like helping in the temporary move or clearing out the house. And then every household also gets assigned a technical counselor who really tries to unburden the family in the renovation process itself. So they ask for quotations, they contact the contractors, and they do the checks of the renovation works. Now a bit more about the recurring fund itself. So as I already said, it's a repayable contribution of 30,000 euros. But it can only be spent on a list of works that the renovation councillor and the participant agreed upon before signing the agreement. So it's really, the meaning is really to stick to works that focus on a basic living quality and energy efficiency. So the list is strict and there's no discussion afterwards. And once the contribution is paid back to the fund when the ownership of the property changes, and to ensure that we take a mortgage on the house, and that's lifted after the contribution of the fund back to the fund. So maybe now more about the goals. Our goal is threefold. The first one is to increase the minimal living quality of all the houses. Secondly, we want to increase the energy efficiency of the houses and therefore also reduce the energy poverty. And we also want to strengthen the participants' social network and their self-reliance and knowledge of social rights and services that they are entitled to. As the project is almost coming to an end, we can already show some intermediate results. The final report isn't finalized yet, but that will come soon. So we can see that our first goal, which was increasing the minimal living quality, is definitely worked out very well. So 88% of the houses are compliant with the Flemish building code after the renovation. And we also took a look at the most common renovation works. Here you can see something not really shiny, but just an update of the electrical system, which was a very high risk for this family before. And these are some other examples where, for example, we were able to insulate the walls, renew the roofs, both of them, and provide new skylights. And this is an example of a unusable attic transformed into a third bedroom and a playground for the kids of this family, which was really important because this family in particular had an unexpected third child that had autism. So they were stuck in their home. They weren't able to create another bedroom, but that was really important for like the well-being of the whole family. So these are some examples of the works that we do. Another indicator for the quality of life is the satisfaction of the owners themselves about the living comfort in their house. You can see here two graphs for the summer and the winter, and you can see definitely in the winter months that the satisfaction has risen a lot before and after the renovation, which is probably due to the large amount of houses where we were able to install roof insulation, new glazing, or central heating system. The second goal was to improve the energy efficiency of the houses. Here you can see that we were able to improve the energy performance certificate has improved from an F label, which is the worst, to a C label, which is better, but still not the goal for 2050, of course. So that's something that we're really looking into right now with the research team and also the policymakers to decide how we're going to move forward after the Icarus project and what changes need to be done to the regulations that we set in place and the budget that we use in order to make sure that we don't make our own lock-ins for the future so that we can really reach the A level. And then the third were the improvements more on a personal level. So here's like something really simple. 49 people before the renovations were happy to be home, so 51% was not happy. But after the renovation, it's 71% that's happy to be home, and we think that's really important. And none of them are still not especially happy to be home. A second indicator for the improvements on personal level is the fact that the Public Center of Social Welfare, so we work very closely with the Department of Social Welfare as well as me from the Social Housing Department, the Housing Department, is that they were able to reach 167 persons and to make sure that they knew about the social rights and services that they are entitled to. And it's important to know that that means that there are 51 non-participants that were also helped through this project. So people who applied but didn't fit into the regulations, so don't take part in the project, but they were still guided through the Public Center of Social Welfare, and now their situation has also improved because they have more rights and social services. And then the last one was like another focus of the social side of the project is the extension of the social network of the participants. So we were able to organize 20 group gatherings and 8 community building activities with all the participants, all adjusted to the COVID-19 regulations, of course, which really created a bigger network for all the participants within their neighborhood. So we think that's some important results as well. And then, as you can see on the quotes, it's also important to acknowledge that when people live in very poor housing conditions, it also affects their self-esteem and their the image that they have of themselves. And in these quotes, you can see that that the renovation has had a positive impact on their self-esteem and the way they can interact with, for example, neighbors now that their house is in a better state and they don't feel ashamed of it anymore. Okay, and then for the conclusions, I think we can say that through this project we were able to include vulnerable low-income homeowners in the much-needed renovation wave. Without our financial instrument, the recurring fund, and the additional support, it would not have been possible for these low-income homeowners to renovate their house. So for them, it would mean that they would be still stuck in these poor living conditions. But for the city, it also means that we slow down the rate of renovation, as was discussed yesterday, we need to pick it up. So so we think it's really important to have these innovative financial instruments, such as our recurring fund, in order to ensure a just transition where everybody can participate, even the most vulnerable target groups. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Darkeen. And I think it's a great example of showing the link in between and green and social policies with concrete tools which are, on the one hand, more financial and with the support and fund for enabling this renovation, but also the social implications in terms, on the one hand, of the support that is needed to accompany, to build capacity, to empower, at the same time as the social impact that it has on people at individual and collectivity, the whole neighborhood. So thanks a lot. Fernando will be happy to hear from the EPU project in Getafe.
Well, thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for having the city of Getafe here today in Seville. Thank you very much for all of you that are attending this last panel of the last day. And thank you to the few people that are here, because I'm going to say 2 words like square tree. Okay. Thank you very much. So, here. IPIU Getafe, Hogares Saludables, Energy Poverty Intelligence Unit. We are leading a project, the municipality of Getafe is leading a project about energy poverty, hidden energy poverty. But what is energy poverty? Brenda Borman states the first definition of energy poverty as the inability of households to obtain adequate energy services in the home for less than 10% of its income. We know that. We know other things like 9.6% of people pay their bills late, or we know too that 15.5% have high or extremely high energy costs in Getafe. But there's a lot of things, data, that we need and we don't know, and like how many of that people do pay bills, but they pay them because they are not going holidays, for example. We don't know either how many people spend less than that 10%, because maybe it's a 0% because they have heating facilities that can not afford to turn them on because they have no money. And we don't know either how many people suffer from heat in summer and cold in winter. So we start working on that scenario. EPIU means Energy Poverty Intelligence Unit, and tackles hidden energy poverty and innovates the way of approaching people. How we do that? We do that using 3 main tools. The first one is the intelligence unit, that is a kind of technological tool that allows us to know the citizenship. The second one is a brand new attention service that allows us to contact potential beneficiaries in the project. And the last one is the designing of TMS, tailor-made solutions, to act and reduce the energy poverty. The first tool we use to know is used by detect hidden energy poverty, but also the vulnerability that leads to that energy poverty, just when some of the indicators that define that energy poverty changes for the worse. We want to go from reaction to prevention using big data. The second one, sorry, I'm still in the first one. We also arrange a reinforced collaboration inside the municipality, between their delegations. They are forced to work together, together better than before. We have already launched a municipal data lake is a place where we gather all that information we are collecting for the potential beneficiaries. That data lake is nourishing this computing tool in order to be able to, in the future, make predictive modeling of energy poverty. The second tool is a brand new attention service with municipal staff. 5 people are working for the last 2 months. 300 families were assisted in that period. And I think more than 1,000 actions have been developed by the people of our new attention service. The third tool we use is called TMS, tailor-made solutions, and they are like groups or of measures that are already available in the market, but we put some of them together with a selection of efficiency measures that match the specific needs of several groups of the population of Getafe. How we do all this, I bring to you this loop to try to explain how we iterate the same process one time to another to get to a more accurate conclusion. The first step of this loop is user contact. We contact citizens and let them through the project procedure. We're tackling hidden energy poverty by locating hidden indicators, by processing the personal data of the population of Getafe. We found really hard to process that personal data because of the data protection bylaws and regulations. We lean on legal basis for processing that personal data, like express consent, performance of a contract or legal requirements, but these bases are not precisely useful for our project because it has no point of asking for express consent for each and every person in Getafe. It's not useful. And there are other types of legal bases like legitimate interest and public interest that only maybe municipalities or public institutions can reach that legitimate kind of legal base. The third one is, well, I have already told you about the municipal data lake. With the information gathered in the municipal data lake, we extract patterns and design methodology to work with that data. EPIU applicants will be clusterized to determine which specific tailor-made solutions work on them and not in other clusters, for example. These tailor-made solutions contains from advice in energy supplies to a whole integral building refurbishment or retrofitting, including to maybe new heating facilities, thermal isolation, new windows. Everything is totally free of charge for the beneficiaries. The last step of the loop is monitoring and evaluation, and it's key to refine the process. One of the partners of the project always say garbage in, garbage out. If the data we are gathering is not quality data, the conclusions will be not quality conclusions. So we restart the loop one and another time to refine the process, enable its transferability, and allow the IA, the intelligence, the artificial intelligence to enter a process of self-learning that enriches the conclusions of the project. Where we are doing this in Getafe. Getafe is one of the largest cities in Madrid region with 185,000 inhabitants. And we are located in two neighborhoods. There are two neighborhoods with low incomes, low energy consumption, and a high energy cost-income ratio. There is several groups of vulnerable population in both neighborhoods. Elderly people, migrants, and disabled people is present in both Fatima and Las Margaritas neighborhood. The buildings we are into has no thermal insulation, most of them, and has no original heating cooling facilities. So they are already made in the 1968, 1972. So they are not included in the first compulsory normative or laws in efficiency building in Spain. And I will skip these slides to get to the last one. Is this just to remind you that everyone can be involved in the EPIU project, because EPIU needs everyone to be involved. We need your data. You need to know who you are, what you need. So our target is to act in 200 homes and 15 buildings, but we are really aimed at getting the knowledge to reduce hidden energy poverty for anyone, anywhere, as EUIA are expecting we do that. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Fernando. I think, so what's very important is that we have these three different aspects of this project: the data, the service, the renovation, once again combining different needs. But also, as you finish on that point, the data, we've talked a lot about available data, especially at EU level in the last 2 days, available databases. But we also know that data is key to ensure the development of adequate local policies, and should be the starting point. So thank you very much for also having detailed the way you do it, also in relation to data protection, because we know it's a major issue also in terms of monitoring energy consumption, and without it you cannot do any relevant public policy, but it's still pretty new for many cities to act effectively on that. So thank you very much. Now we're moving to a to a different topic, different focus as well. So we move to the city of Umeå, and we look at the way the city, which is a front runner in terms of, I don't know how to say in the most adequate way, I would say gender perspective on local policies, but especially looking differently at local policies, ensuring that everybody is actually addressed and targeted, so the way they do it for urban mobility. So Annika, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much to the UIA and to Marceline for the invitation to this event and this panel. I'm very happy to be here, even though Umeå is not a UIA city yet, although we would love to be in the future. But we are an URBACT city, and as we heard, the UIA and URBACT are closely related. And I work as a gender equality officer at the municipality of Umeå in Sweden, and I'm not going to talk about a specific project, but rather give you a brief overview of how we think and work with the relation between sustainable mobility and gender equality, and just give you a few quick examples, a little bit superficial because of time constraints, but just to give you an idea of how we operationalize it. Just to contextualize, Umeå is in the north of Sweden. It's about 600 kilometers north of Stockholm. So I left, it was still a bit of snow when I left to come here to 25 degrees of summer heat for me in Sevilla. Very nice, I must say. And Umeå is a city of 130,000 inhabitants, and it's continuously growing. We have a steady, continuous growth rate, and we also have a vision of becoming 200,000 residents by the year 2050. And in this vision, it states also that this growth shall be made with maintain social, environmental, economic, and cultural sustainability. So it's kind of explicitly written into our growth strategies that all the different dimensions of sustainability should be part of this process. And when we talk about social sustainability in Umeå, gender equality is really at the core of the social sustainability. Umeå is a city that has worked with strategically with gender equality for over 30 years, and we have an overall municipal goal for gender equality, which is that the municipality should create conditions for women and men to have equal power to shape society and their own lives. And since this is an overall goal, and it also has a strategy for gender equality, this also means that each part of the municipality should work towards this goal within the reach of their branch or their area of work. And we also have an institutional structure, and we also have a political structure. So we have a political a gender equality committee of elected representatives that also revises the decisions from a gender perspective. And Umeå, the work of Umeå is also selected as an URBACT best practice, and we're currently the lead partner of the first ever URBACT action planning network on gender equality, which we're very proud of. It's called Gendered Landscape. And Gender Landscape is really also the name of the methodology that we use, or kind of the approach that we have to gender equality when we plan our city. Because we know that gender equality is, or gender inequality, is a globally understood problem, but we really firmly believe that the solutions need to be locally contextualized because there is no one-size-fits-all solution. And in order to find that, we really need to understand the landscape, the gendered landscape of our place, our city, how the gendered power structures shape what is around us, shape the service, the infrastructure of the place, and what conditions, under what conditions, what groups move and use the city. So things like the gender segregated labor market, the fear of being exposed to violence, for example, what does that do to certain groups and how they access and move in the city? Where do we move in the city? The division of responsibility for unpaid care and housework, what conditions does that generate for how we use the city, etc. While the previous speakers on this panel were talking about housing and on energy poverty, I wanted to explain why I want to speak about mobility. Because although Umeå is situated almost on the Arctic Circle, we actually, maybe also it's because of that, the climate, that we have good housing, good insulation, we're kind of forced to have that. And we also have climate neutral district heating. So that's not the big challenge for us. Rather, the big challenge, if we see this consumption habits survey, we see that the emissions, the big problem is transport when it comes to our local context. Half of the local carbon footprint comes from transport. So mobility is really a core thematic for us. And these are old numbers. This is from the Travel Habits Survey in 2014. We're currently undertaking a new travel habits survey, so we'll have updated figures this year. But from this old travel habits survey, we could see that half of the trips in the urban area were made by car, which is not acceptable if we want to have a sustainable transition. We need to really increase the use of more sustainable modes of transport. Now, what does this have to do with gender equality? Well, if we look at the travel habit, the previous travel habit survey, and look at the data with gender segregated, in a gender segregated way, we could see that in 2014, 56% of women's travel were with sustainable means of transport, so walking, bike, or public transport, whereas only 42% of the men's travel. And now the goal is 65% of the travel, but at that time, the municipal goal that we had for sustainable travel was that at least 55% of all trips in the urban area should be made by sustainable transport, which means that if men would travel like women, we would have already reached the goal. And that really raises questions like what kind of measures should we focus our efforts on? Should we focus on electrifying the buses, or maybe we should really focus on targeting men's travel habits? So we really believe that it's important to understand this local context and have this gender segregated data to really focus our efforts where we want them. And when it comes to creating and incentivizing sustainable travel, well, public transport is one of those. And we really need to ask what our important message is that we really need to ask critical questions about when we plan and build infrastructure and services, whose lives are we facilitating? We know, for example, statistically that women's and men's travel patterns are different. We know that women, for example, as a group, do more chain trips than men. Women tend to go maybe from work and then stop by the daycare and pick up children, or maybe go to the supermarket and buy groceries and go home, whereas men as a group to a higher extent travels to and from work. So if we plan a public transport system with routes that takes us from point A to point B and back, whose lives are we facilitating then? And for example, things like tickets. Do we permit that you can transfer from one bus route to another so you can make a chain trip, or do you have to buy a new ticket every time, etc.? And we also have to look at the gendered landscape of the city. For example, where the labor market structure, where are the big work spaces located? Where do women work? Where do men work? And also things like safety and security. For example, from your side on the right, that's a new train station, and it's close to the hospital, which is a really big work space, and it's very female dominated. In care work, more women work, and they also work in shifts, so different hours of the day. So when you have to go to and from work, everybody has the right to feel safe. So to build this station, we used focus groups with nurse assistants and to assess also their needs and wishes to how they can use collective transport. So it has glass walls. When you go inside, it has an overview. You can see the space and who is in there, so you won't get surprised. You also feel seen. And safety is an important issue when we build infrastructure. This is an example of a tunnel where you can walk and bike. And we know that tunnels in general are places where people tend to feel unsafe, and women to a higher degree than men. So when we rebuilt this tunnel, we really focused on creating a space where you could feel safe, and that was also accessible. So it's wider than regular tunnels. It's also brighter. The old tunnel was really steep. This one is not as steep, which makes it easier if you go with a stroller, for example, or if you have a wheelchair. There are rounded corners so that nobody can hide behind the corner. There's also an exit in the middle, and all of that, I mean, it creates a feeling of safety, but that also makes people, if you have a nice place that people chooses to go through, that also increases the flows of people in public space, and that in itself is also generates a feeling of safety, because if you feel like you're in the company of other people and you know that I will meet other people and they will see me when I go here, that also is a safety, increases the feeling of safety. And of course you don't, you can choose to go through this tunnel instead of avoiding a tunnel that feels dark and unsafe, and maybe choose going through traffic or another route restricting your mobility in public space. I just also wanted to give you one last example, which is kind of planning for the future. Because, as I said, Umeå is a growing city, and we need more houses. We don't have the problem of empty spaces, but rather the problem of lack of housing. We need more places for people to live. So this is an entirely new neighborhood. These rendered houses that you see in the picture is an entirely new neighborhood that's starting to be built right now, and it has 3,000. It's going to have, when it's finished, it's going to have 3,000 homes and also offices and etc. And it's really close to the hospital and the university, which are big working areas. And when we want to change and create a more sustainable city, we know that one of the most expensive things and most difficult things to change is infrastructure. Like, once it's in place, it's hard to change. So now that we have the chance to build an entire new neighborhood, we really want to do it right from the beginning. And it's also, it has a focus on sustainable mobility. It's focused on travel patterns and transports, in order to decrease the dependency on cars. So we want for this neighborhood that the car will not be the norm, but rather that the bike and walking paths will be really central to the neighborhood, whereas the cars will be in the periphery. It will be easier to go by collective or public transportation than by car. So, for example, in this new neighborhood, you see the green dots. Those are the parking hubs. So we will not have parking right next to the houses, but rather there will be a few parking hubs, and then you can park the bike next to your house. So if you want to take the car, you'll have to walk a few blocks to get to your car, whereas if you want to take the bike or the bus, you will have the bus stop right outside your house or the bike right outside your house. And we're also planning service hubs to kind of have a close, to facilitate sustainable everyday life with services, grocery stores, etc. Also to make sure that the services that you need in your everyday life, you have them close. This is, we're already building, the machines are already there digging in the ground, so we're very excited about this. And I know I talked for a long time, I think, so I just wanted to say this last thing, that When we talk about transition and climate adaptation, we are very excited about new technological solutions, but it's really important to remember as well that we also need to challenge old norms, power structures, identity. This is just as important as introducing new technology if we want to reach climate neutrality. So ask critical questions and challenge the old ways of doing things. So thank you very much for this.
Thank you very much, Annika. Yeah, I think this also summarizes quite well the three presentations we had in terms of changing paradigm, changing the ways we look at things, and ensuring that, well, more widely, and not actually even talking about the green transition, but as a city, that what we make is actually meaningful, and that we can really ensure that yeah, everybody's on board, and that just it makes sense and simplifies lives, at the same time as you said, also increasing security, increasing usages of all these new services and technologies, public transport, but can be knowing where to go to if we don't have nearby a service for energy support or the fund for renovation or the missing skills. So thank you very much. Thank you very much to all of you for your in-depth presentation. I'd like to invite our two next panelists to come with us on here. So we have Julie Young representing the European Office of the Covenant of Mayors, and Özgür Öner from representing the Housing Europe Association. And I'll start before actually giving already the microphone for someone to go through the audience. I'll start by asking the two of you how your organizations can actually, or what do they do to support this green transition to all, to what are, in light of the activities that you carry out, the support that you provide to your members or to your signatories, how do you ensure that this link in between green and social is made? And maybe I'll start with you, Julie, if that's fine, to give you the first floor.
Sure, thank you. Thank you. So the Covenant of Mayors is one of the largest and most important initiatives of the European Union for cities to come together and work on energy and climate. Yesterday, one of the summary of the workshops, the speaker emphasized that the projects, each of the successful projects that we've heard yesterday and today are really great, but a strategy is still needed to make sure that all the projects are going in the same direction. So this is something that the Covenant provides. It works on 3 pillars: mitigation, adaptation, and energy poverty. So within energy poverty, we're actually not only talking about energy and affordability of energy, but also affordability of transport, affordability of housing as well. So these are all incorporated in this pillar. We do work very closely with the Energy Poverty Advisory Hub, which is another initiative of the Commission to provide support to municipalities on these topics. And on the adaptation side, recently launched was the Policy Support Facility, which focuses only on adaptation, and we're targeting the Mediterranean and Eastern European member states. And one of the focuses is also just resilience, incorporating social aspects into adaptation to make sure that everybody is included in municipal planning. So I'll stop here for now so that we have some time for Onur as well.
Thank you very much. Before directly answering to your question, I will briefly present the association so you do have an answer or an idea what the contribution of our members can be. I'm representing Housing Europe, which is the European Association of public, social and cooperative housing at European level. We have 46 national regional member associations covering more than 45,000 housing companies in 25 countries, and we all together house more than 110 million people in Europe. That means a fourth of the European population. And me personally, I'm working for the German real estate and for the public, cooperative, and also private housing sector. So what we are trying to do is, of course, now what we're facing is there is a general push to be as soon as possible more climate neutral, of course, but also to look for possibilities how to do that technically, but also financially. And we have identified already that there is a lack of knowledge, lack of exchange of practices. So everyone is doing, you know, there are 27 now, 27 different countries. Everyone is doing his own stuff. Everyone is inventing the wheel in a new way. That is something where we could work on it. And in that way, we have also applied as Housing Europe for a European project, Shape EU. I very much hope, Pierre has left already, unfortunately, but we very much hope that we will get this platform also to mobilize our members to exchange their strategy. But the most important point is, of course, and that's what I liked very much in your presentation, it should be a human-centered approach. So we're talking about green transition and everything. The reality on the ground with tenants is they are scared. They're scared. No one wants to have touched his home. That is not done in 1 month, 2 months. These procedures take 2, 3, 4 years. We are losing tenants, elderly tenants, because they can't stand the stress. Just to be aware also of the challenges we are going through, and that is something that we have to do very, very carefully. And so it's also my pledge, the human-centered approach. And from the human-centered approach, we can then look at different goals we do have. I would stop here. Thank you.
Does it? Yeah, now it seems we're working. Thank you very much. I had planned a series of questions for this panel, but we haven't had that much chance for intervention with the audience earlier on today, nor the previous days in the plenary. So I would suggest already that those of you who have questions can already raise your hands. We have the microphone over there, and you can address the questions to specific panelists or to the whole panel. And while you think, and while the microphone is moving around, so don't be shy. We have lunch, but that's the only opportunity you will have to share, also to showcase. You can showcase, or you can share your own experience on that. Well, while you think, and don't hesitate to raise your hands when you want to intervene, then I'll ask, maybe I'll just do a very short tour of our panelists, just to briefly share with us. We've seen the presentations. It was a lot of very interesting insights, especially on the solutions. But if you could summarize in 1, 2 words, 1, 2 ideas, each of you in a row, I would say, what are the main barriers to ensure that everybody's on board? It can be from the city side or from the people side. And yeah, just go one after the other.
All right, so that means me?
Yes,
to start? Okay. Well, I think that one important barrier in general to really make sure that we include everyone in the sense that we really create solutions that really serve the needs of specific groups is the lack of data in general in many cities. That we might have overall general data, but I think it's really important that we also have, for example, gender segregated data and data that is segregated for different groups, because it's not a city's inhabitants is not in general a very homogeneous group, but rather different groups have different conditions. And if we assume that one solution that we implement in our city will fit everyone and will serve and kind of facilitate the lives and help everyone to participate in the transition, then I think we might be making a mistake. So I think that having segregated data that helps us understand the specific conditions of different groups really is a crucial first step.
Thank you very much. So if we think in terms of barriers, it's the lack of data, the first hurdle. Okay, thanks a lot. What about Fernando?
I agree 100% with Annika. Data is the key. Is the key for start to act with interacting with the people. But in Getafe, we noticed that the severe vulnerability keep those people away from ordinary calls for beneficiaries, for example. And it's really hard to try to know how a hidden person is, when he's hidden, when he's maybe out of the scope of the survey, or maybe is undocumented, is irregular migrant, and those are the people that we need to access to them. So it's really difficult to make them into the loop. But once they are in, we have to respond to what they really need. For example, if you change a heating facility to a kind of severe vulnerable people, maybe they will simply take the facility and sell it for food. Maybe. We don't know, but this could happen. And we notice that for that kind of people, maybe the simpler solutions are really worthy, are really useful for them. We used to give, in the project, in EPIU project, a kit, efficiency, like an emergency kit made with bulbs, carpets, curtains. And it's something that you don't have to have a contract of or a gas or energy contract. You simply check the box and install by yourself. So you have to adapt the solutions to the people, and not always the more expensive one is the best. So you have to.
Yeah, and I suppose one of the aspects is, well, obviously, as we keep on repeating, to work directly with the people, but how to reach them is also working with partner organizations who know these people, who know the reality, who can work also as translator of reality, of languages, and all this kind of multi-stakeholder partnership would be then key for going further in this direction. Thanks a lot. Julie, from your experience at, I would say, higher, more overview and high level and transversal, yeah.
Yes, so for energy poverty, I think within the covenant, a lot of the municipalities are really beginners on this topic. Of course, there are front runners, very experienced as well, but in general, there are many beginners, and they don't know where to start. So the pillar that is developed is very, very recent, and together with the Joint Research Center and the Energy Poverty Advisory Hub, the Covenant has put together a list of indicators looking at energy, mobility, housing, how to make this affordable to all the citizens. So this is kind of a guidance for cities to know how to identify the problems that they're facing, because sometimes this is the thing, they don't know where to start and how to really identify the problems. So that's on the energy poverty side. On the adaptation side, the facility that I mentioned earlier that was launched, we're trying to address two main barriers. The first one is vertical integration. We mentioned it yesterday as well. And here we're really trying to help municipalities be connected to and supported to European and national frameworks and the support that's offered at that level. And the second one is within the municipalities. We see that project preparation, the demand on staff capacity is always very high. So we are launching now technical assistance for cities. There's a call that's open now until the end of May. And we're really working with 40 cities on one of their adaptation actions throughout a year, with experts helping them to implement it, whether it's getting a plan in place or doing a feasibility study or really on the ground doing construction maybe. So these are the few points that we've been working on to tackle.
So a lot of useful information to find on your website as well. So
Yes,
go and have a look if you haven't done so. Derkin, you don't need to be super long. You just can also repeat what you've just said in a few words.
Okay. Well, from my perspective, in the renovation project with low-income homeowners, we identified two main barriers. The first one is obviously the financial barrier. Not everyone has the financial means to renovate. In Belgium, there's a lot of premiums and bonuses available to stimulate and to help citizens to renovate, but they always require a pre-investment of the owner. The works have to be carried out and paid for before the application can be handed in. So that's a really big barrier for those people who don't even have the means to pre-finance it. And then secondly, maybe a bit unexpected, a renovation is hard for everybody, and because those people with low incomes often have a lot of other problems as well, it's hard to make the time and energy to start a renovation. It also requires some skills about like asking for quotations, making contracts with the contractors, have clear communication, and those are skills that not everybody possesses, and they just don't have time and energy to start the renovation.
And finding companies.
Finding contractors as well, yes. That's a challenge for the project as well, actually.
And that's fits perfectly what you're doing in your project as well. Zagreb, for your last.
Thank you. No, I would like to point three points. First of all, there is a differentiation also within the European countries, member states, in the percentage of tenants and percentage of homeowners. So just talking about renovation in general is misleading, because there are different approaches in countries, for instance, where rental is the way of living. That is, for instance, Germany, Swiss, but Swiss is not EU, but also what we do have in metropolitan areas like in Sweden and Scandinavian countries, or also in Austria with Vienna and so on. There the approach is completely different. Some approaches are easier because then companies could take it over. And the responsibility and the share is different, especially to that what Derkin has explained. And then we do have also, of course, another issue with countries with a strong home ownership. But there, coming back to that, that is also a philosophical and state question. You know, you do have homeowners on the one hand, and tenants on the other hand, and maybe social tenants. So the question is it really the duty and responsibility of a state to finance homeowners? That's just something what I would like to give to think about it. There is no solution about that, because we have to help everyone. We can't leave someone behind. But is that the point? And that is something what we would have to think about that. And also another point, what is the duty and responsibility of a state? Is it providing people with decent quality homes, or pushing people into home ownership, even these population and these income groups who can't afford to be a homeowner? Someone on minimum wage with 1,000 to 1,200 euros, you make him homeowner. What will happen after 20, 30 years? Then the renovation is in front of you, and they have no time, they have no money, because even the pension scheme then is very low. That is one point. I know it's maybe more philosophical in that way, but it gives you some thoughts for the lunch. Second point is, to your question, is money, money, money.
Yeah.
Money, money, money. That's the point. Without money, you can't do it. We have calculated that for us, taking people on board means take the anxiety out of them, from them. That means, in our case, you have to offer tenants something like, for instance, a gross net neutrality. Believe us, after the renovation, there will be no risk of renovation. You will stay there, and the rent will be more or less calculable for you. And to do that, only in Germany, we would need 30 billion euro per year. In France, our colleagues has calculated that per apartment, they would need 65,000 euro per apartment. That is also a figure, and member states, and then of course municipalities think they should be aware of the huge financial challenges. It's not only done by words, because if we don't put the money on the table, we will not be able to take the people on board.
Thank you very much. If Julian, you can be extremely brief. I just wanted to ask you as a final question, and I think I haven't seen any questions from the audience, so that's why we're going to close. Maybe closing the loop. We've been very concrete and focusing on the implementation at city level, talked about local policies. Maybe going back to the wider discussion on the policy, on the EU policy framework. Where can you see are the biggest strength at the moment? And what we've heard about all the available funds, about the policies, but where do you think really cities can benefit from the EU to act locally? And maybe I'll start with you, Julie, because I know you can be brief and you can show the example.
Will do. So I think I've already mentioned. So I've already mentioned a couple of names. Of course, the Energy Poverty Advisory Hub, the policy support facility that we're doing now. But if we look at the EU level, on the national level, there's also the national energy and climate plans, and now they've been mandated to include energy poverty as well, definitions, timelines, things like this. The renovation wave, energy poverty was also included as a key priority. And then for just resilience, the European Environment Agency is really now starting to work on this topic. They are giving a lot of guidance and looking into how municipalities can integrate just resilience considerations along every step of the planning process. So that's something to watch out for. They already have some things published, but they will continue to do so in the next year or two.
Thank you very much. Özgür?
Thank you. I will make it brief. I think, especially within the cohesion policy and the upcoming cohesion policy, there are many, many means based also on the integrated approach, which should be also more in a way, a template for the other DGs within the Commission to follow more an integrated approach, also with focus on districts. So within the cohesion policy, there is a lot of to do for municipalities, for regions. Furthermore, via the InvestEU program, via the EIB, we do have tools for companies, of course. That is nothing for individual people, but for municipalities in combination with private companies. That might be a very good approach to start to initiate, or at least to organize the money for the upcoming, challenges.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I had a last slide. Yes. So I think we've had a very interesting discussion. I'm really grateful for all those who stayed until the end. I think everybody now needs a proper lunch, but also take this as an opportunity for networking and further continuing this discussion, as it is the only opportunity for these days to discuss in person. We've talked a lot about data, the need for data today, but I cannot resist the temptation to conclude with the same concept, I think, as the one or the concern everybody's been focusing on in the last 2 days about the people. So having a human-centered approach, really looking into what are the people needs, how to best address their needs. So it's all about co-creation, it's about going and talking to them, it's about having the right intermediaries, the right translators, and overall as city makers to ensure that, once again, local policies, especially in relation to transition and green transition, make sense. Very last piece of information. You can sign up for the newsletter of the Just Transitions work. Here you get information about, and on the website you can also already check all that has been published in general terms, more specifically with the EDI strand already, the jobs and skills work. Our work will be there, and we really look forward to sharing with you the results, more insights, more conclusions, and more key messages and roadmaps with regard to our particular topics in later this year. So thank you very much. There is still a final word. coming up, I think. And for us, well, it was a pleasure to be with you and looking forward to continuing over lunch. And thank you very much to all the panelists.
Bien, con esta última sesión.
With this last intervention, our two-day session or conference concludes. So we would like to thank all of the participants for the time they've dedicated to preparing their speeches, which have inspired new projects, new relationships, and new ideas.
On behalf of UIA, I'd like to extend our greatest thanks and appreciation to the city of Seville for welcoming us in this beautiful city, and also to the IMACESA organizing team, so José Antonio here, José Antonio Mateo, sorry, and Lucas Perea, also Rosa Santos, Reyes Milan, Belen Martin. Also, I would like to thank, and a special thanks to the UIA organizing team as well, and all and everyone else that contributed to making this event a success. Thank you very much for this. And also, of course, a warm thank you to you all to attend this 2 days event. You made, I think, this event really a great experience for all and inspiring us to implement and to act for climate action. Thank you very much to all.
Gracias. Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon.
About citizens, cities, about funds, innovation, social innovation, projects, challenges, barriers. In fact, we have been talking about just transition. All of us have a bit hurry to have lunch, so I just want to thank to UA, to the Seville team, to Amélie team. We've been working together with nearly to 20 people from 6 nationalities and working in 3 languages. It was sometimes a bit chaos. Thank you very much. Thank you to the panelists, of course. Thank you to the City Hall of Seville, that is our amphitheater, to the Cartuja Central, to the technical of sound, of imaging, to the translators that have been working all the day and sometimes with a lot of very fast. Eh? Don't laugh, Nelida. I know what thinking in you. In fact, I want to thank to all the people here, to the knowledge that they are putting on the table here, and muchas gracias a todos. Solamente para concluir, una información de interés ahora para.
Just some information for what's coming up. We're having lunch now. We need to go outside the building and get back inside through door number 7. You have, if you have any luggage, they have been taken to the lunch area. So if you can, we can go there to enjoy lunch. Thank you very much.
A la derecha. ¿Vale?
Yes, in English?